Hey everyone, and welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
We're so excited you're joining us as we, explore all these fascinating topics. And hey, since we're a brand new podcast, we'd love it if you hit that subscribe button.
Yeah.
Leave us a comment, let us know what other deep dives you'd like to hear from us. We always make sure to use trustworthy sources
Oh, absolutely.
and really take our time to understand, these complex topics before we try to, share them with you. Today, we're diving into the world of overthinking, exploring how, get this, our past experiences can shape how we see the world.
It's so true.
And it all boils down to the concept of brain plasticity. That's the brain's ability to kind of change and adapt over time. It's amazing we can rewire our thinking patterns. Think back to your childhood for a second. Imagine growing up where things felt really unpredictable. Maybe adults who valued control or were inconsistent.
Right.
Maybe you were left to figure things out on your own a lot. What do you think that does to a developing brain?
Well, what we see is that these experiences, they can actually teach your brain. That being super vigilant is the key to navigating the world safely.
Wow.
You develop hypervigilance as a coping mechanism. You're not even aware of it.
So your brain's always on high alert, scanning for potential threats, even if there's no real danger.
Exactly. That's it.
Wow.
And this childhood vigilance, it can follow us right into adulthood, often turning into what we know as overthinking, like your brain is stuck in overdrive, analyzing every single situation, always looking for problems, even in the most normal scenarios.
I can see that. Can you give us like a real world example of what this looks like?
Sure. Let's say you're in line at the grocery store, and the person ahead of you starts complaining to the cashier about a coupon that's not working. Some people might just brush it off, but an overthinker's mind goes into a tailspin.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. You start dissecting the whole interaction, wondering if you should have said something, or if you were somehow involved just by standing there.
Exactly. You get caught in that cycle of self-doubt, second-guessing, as if those thoughts are undeniable truths.
It's like being trapped in a box. Your past dictates how you see the present.
You got it. That's a great way to visualize it. We call it the perception box. This invisible barrier created by your experiences, filtering everything you see through the lens of those old beliefs and anxieties.
Okay, so how do we end up trapped in this perception box to begin with? It feels so hard to escape those thoughts.
Our brains have this sneaky habit of confirming what they already believe. It's called confirmation bias. It means our brains love to find evidence that supports our existing beliefs, even if those beliefs aren't helpful or even negative.
So if you think the world is dangerous, and you always need to be on guard, your brain focuses on the few times something bad actually happens, reinforcing that belief.
Precisely. It ignores all the times things went fine and zooms in on the moments that confirm your fears. It's like your brain is cherry-picking evidence to support its own story.
That's got to be exhausting. Especially in social situations, you can never relax.
It can be very draining, that's true. But here's the thing. This overthinking, frustrating as it is, it often comes from a place of trying to protect you. Your brain, in its own way, is just trying to keep you safe, even if it's going overboard.
So the first step is recognizing that these patterns aren't necessarily true. They're echoes of past experiences that might not even be relevant anymore.
Exactly. That awareness, shining a light on these ingrained patterns, that's a huge first step toward change.
So we're not doomed to be stuck in these thought patterns. What can we do to rewire our brains and break free from this cycle?
That's where the amazing concept of brain plasticity comes in.
Okay, break down brain plasticity for us. What does that even mean?
Think of your brain like a forest with paths carved through it. Those paths are your ingrained beliefs and thought patterns. Just like you can make new trails in a forest, you can form new neural pathways in your brain.
Wait, you mean even as adults?
Mm-hmm.
We can create new paths. We're not stuck with the old ones.
Absolutely. It takes work and practice, just like making a new trail. But with time and dedication, you can rewire your brain to respond to situations from a place of calm and confidence, instead of fear and self-doubt.
This is giving me so much hope. But how do we even start creating these new pathways? What are the practical steps to rewire our overthinking brains?
There are 5 key steps that can help you begin this transformation. The first step is crucial. It's learning to catch yourself in the moment of overthinking, cultivating awareness and hitting pause. When those thoughts start spiraling.
So instead of getting swept away by worry and anxiety, you take a step back and ask, hold on, is this thought even true? Is it helpful?
Exactly. You start to challenge the validity of those automatic thoughts rather than just blindly accepting them. And that leads us to the second step.
Okay, what's next in this rewiring process?
The second step is actively challenging those negative beliefs that are fueling the overthinking. If you've been carrying around beliefs like, I'm not good enough, or I'm going to mess things up if I don't think it through a million times, it's time to face those beliefs head on.
So we're talking about actively looking for evidence. That contradicts those beliefs. Like, if you're convinced you'll embarrass yourself socially, remind yourself of all the times you had great interactions.
Exactly. It's like putting those negative thoughts on trial. Write them down, and next to each one, list all the reasons why they might not be true.
I love that. It's like creating a counter argument to those thoughts. So we've got awareness and challenging negative beliefs. What's the next step in rewiring those thoughts?
The third step is introducing something new, practicing positive affirmations.
Okay, I'm willing to try anything, but how do affirmations actually help rewire our brains?
Think of it this way. When you repeat positive statements about yourself, even if you don't fully believe them at first, you're planting seeds of possibility in your mind. You're literally reprogramming your brain.
So even if you don't initially believe the affirmation, I am capable and confident, by repeating it, you're creating new pathways that make your brain more likely to believe it.
Exactly. It's like replacing those old worn-out records with fresh, empowering tracks. It takes time for the new music to sink in. But with consistent practice, those affirmations can start to drown out the negative self-talk.
Okay, this is making sense. So far, we've got awareness, challenging negative beliefs, and introducing positive affirmations. What's the next piece of the puzzle?
Step 4 is about taking action, gradually stepping outside your comfort zone. We call it gradually taking risks. This one might feel scarier because it involves testing those new beliefs in real life.
So we're talking about pushing those boundaries, especially in those social situations that trigger the overthinking. What are some examples of risks we could take?
Let's say you always hesitate to share your ideas in meetings because you're afraid of judgment. The risk would be to challenge that fear and speak up anyway.
It's about facing those fears head on, instead of letting them control you. And by doing that, you're testing those old beliefs, gathering evidence to support your new, more empowered beliefs.
Precisely. It's about proving to yourself that the world doesn't end when you make a mistake or share a different opinion.
This is so powerful. We're almost there. What's the fifth and final key to rewiring our brains?
The fifth step is all about letting go of perfectionism, letting go of the need for absolute control, and embracing the beauty of imperfection. This is a big one because the drive for perfection is often at the very core of overthinking.
Oh, I totally get that. It's like this constant pressure to get everything perfect. To never make a mistake, it can be paralyzing.
But here's the thing. Perfect is an illusion. Mistakes are not only inevitable, but they're valuable opportunities for learning and growth.
So it's about accepting imperfection as part of the human experience, as part of what makes us unique.
Exactly. By releasing the need for absolute control, for doing everything flawlessly, you free yourself to be more present, authentic, and spontaneous in your interactions.
I'm starting to see how these 5 steps work together. To break free from that overthinking cycle, it's about challenging those ingrained patterns and replacing them with healthier, more realistic ones.
And remember, those new paths in the forest of your mind might feel unfamiliar and maybe even a bit uncomfortable at first. It takes time and effort to strengthen those new pathways. But with practice, they'll become easier and more natural to walk.
This has been so insightful. We've covered a lot today, from understanding how overthinking takes root to exploring the steps we can take to rewire our brains. What stands out to you as the most important takeaway from all this?
I think the most empowering message is, change is possible. You are not stuck with these thought patterns forever. It takes time, effort, and a willingness to step outside your comfort zone. But the rewards are truly life-changing.
I love that. We have the power to shape our own minds and create a more peaceful, fulfilling way of experiencing the world. And you know what's even more encouraging? We don't have to do it alone. We'll be back to explore the next step in breaking free from the overthinking crap in just a bit.
So we just talked about how we can actually rewire our brains. And, that's totally possible thanks to brain plasticity. And that first step you mentioned, catching yourself in the moment of overthinking, that's so important. It's like becoming aware of the autopilot that we're often running on.
Yeah, you're so right. We're often so used to these thought patterns that we don't even realize they're happening. It's like they're running in the background without us even noticing.
Exactly. So the first step is simply observing those thoughts. Don't judge them, fight them, or push them away. Just notice that they are there.
Okay, so how do we do that? Can you give us an example? Like, what if you're in a situation where you're feeling those familiar anxieties creeping in? Let's say you're about to give a presentation at work.
Okay, so you might start feeling that tension, that tightness in your chest. Your mind might start racing, thinking, what if I mess up? Or what if they don't like it? And that's your cue to pause. Just take a moment to acknowledge those sensations and thoughts.
It's like taking a step back and saying, okay, I see you, anxiety.
Hmm.
I know you're here.
Exactly. You could even say to yourself, I'm noticing that I'm starting to overthink this presentation. It's about becoming an observer of your thoughts, not getting swept away by them.
It sounds like creating a little bit of space between you and those thoughts can make a big difference. So once you've paused and acknowledged those thoughts, you can move on to the next step, which is challenging those negative beliefs.
Right. We talked about how important it is to actively look for evidence that contradicts those negative beliefs. Let's say you have the thought, everyone is going to think my presentation is boring. How can you challenge that?
Well, instead of just accepting that thought as truth, you could ask yourself, is there any evidence to support this thought? Maybe you've received positive feedback on your presentations in the past. Maybe you've seen other presentations that weren't flashy or entertaining, but were still well received because the content was valuable.
Exactly. It's about taking a step back and looking at the situation more objectively. You might also ask yourself, is this thought even helpful? Is it serving me in any way? And if it's just making you feel more anxious and stressed, it's probably time to let it go.
So it's not about suppressing those thoughts completely, but rather examining them with a more critical and compassionate eye.
Exactly. It's about creating a space between your thoughts and your reactions. Now let's move on to the third step. Practicing positive affirmations. I know it can feel a bit awkward at first, but it can be so powerful.
We're starting to see how it all fits together. So how do we make positive affirmations work for us?
Remember that your brain is like a muscle, and you can train it to think more positively. The more you repeat those affirmations, even if you don't believe them at first, the more your brain starts to accept them as possibilities. It's like creating new grooves in your thinking patterns.
So even if you're struggling with thoughts like, I'm not good enough or I'm going to fail, you can start to shift those beliefs by repeating affirmations like, I am capable and worthy, or I am confident in my abilities.
Precisely. The key is to choose affirmations that resonate with you and that address the specific negative beliefs you want to challenge.
Now I'm curious about the fourth step, gradually taking risks. It sounds a bit daunting, but I can see how it would be essential for breaking free from old patterns.
It definitely takes courage, but it's also incredibly rewarding. Remember, we're trying to break free from those old limiting beliefs. To do that, we need to push ourselves outside of our comfort zones and gather evidence that supports our new beliefs.
Can you give some more examples of what taking risks might look like in everyday life?
Sure, it could be something like joining a new club or group, attending a social event where you don't know many people, or expressing your opinion in a meeting even if you're afraid of being judged. It's about challenging yourself to do things that make you a little uncomfortable, but that also have the potential to help you grow.
And each time you take a risk and see that the world doesn't end, that your fears don't come true, you strengthen those new neural pathways and build confidence.
Exactly. You start to see that you are capable of handling challenges and that your old fears were often unfounded.
This is all making sense, but let's dive into that fifth and final step, letting go of perfection. For overthinkers, this seems like a particularly challenging one.
You're absolutely right. The pursuit of perfection can be a major roadblock to happiness and fulfillment. It keeps us from taking risks, trying new things, and truly embracing life as it is.
Yeah, it's like we're so afraid of making mistakes that we end up stuck in inaction. How can we start to loosen perfection's grip?
It starts with recognizing that perfection is an illusion. As humans, we're all perfectly imperfect. Mistakes are inevitable and they don't define us. In fact, mistakes are often our greatest teachers.
So it's about changing our perspective on mistakes. Instead of seeing them as failures, we can view them as opportunities to learn and grow.
Exactly. Remember, progress, not perfection, is the goal. Focus on making small improvements over time and celebrate those wins no matter how small.
It sounds like self-compassion is a key ingredient here. Instead of beating ourselves up for our mistakes, we can treat ourselves with kindness and understanding.
Absolutely. Self-compassion is essential for breaking free from the overthinking trap. Now, before we move on to our final segment, let's pause and consider this. What resonates most with you so far about the idea of rewiring your brain?
You know, what strikes me is how interconnected these 5 steps are. They work together to create a more balanced and fulfilling way of experiencing the world. By catching ourselves in the moment of overthinking, challenging those negative beliefs, practicing positive affirmations, gradually taking risks, and letting go of perfection, we are essentially rewiring our brains for greater happiness, resilience, and inner peace.
You've beautifully captured the essence of this process. It's about creating a more conscious and compassionate relationship with your thoughts. And when you do that, the possibilities are truly limitless.
This has been such an insightful conversation. I'm already feeling more hopeful and empowered to tackle those overthinking patterns, but we're not done yet. We'll be right back to explore some specific ways to put these principles into action in your daily life. All right, we're back, ready to wrap up our deep dive into rewiring that overthinking brain. I don't know about you, but I am ready to put all this into practice.
It's pretty cool how understanding a few key concepts can really shift your whole perspective,
For sure. So we've got our 5 steps to rewiring our brains. Let's get practical. What are some common situations where overthinking just takes over? And how can we use these steps to handle them better?
One that a lot of people struggle with is social interactions. Those times when you feel a bit awkward or self-conscious, like meeting new people at a party.
Oh, tell me about it. My mind goes into overdrive, analyzing every word, every gesture.
I hear you. That's when that first step, catching yourself in the moment, is so key. Just notice those thoughts and feelings, no judgment. Just acknowledge, okay, I'm overthinking this.
Got it. I've caught myself. What's next? How do I challenge those thoughts telling me I'm going to say something dumb, make a fool of myself?
Remember, those negative thoughts, they're often like bullies trying to scare you. But deep down, they're not that strong. Ask yourself, what evidence do I have for these thoughts? You might find there's no real evidence, just your insecurities acting up.
Right, separating the thoughts from reality. And that's where the positive affirmations come in, right? To
Yeah.
fight back with something more empowering.
Exactly. You can remind yourself of your strengths, your good qualities. Tell yourself, I'm interesting, I can connect with people. It might feel weird at first, like you're trying to convince yourself, but keep at it. With repetition, those affirmations can start to rewire things.
What about taking risks in these situations? How do we step out of our comfort zone, little by little?
Instead of waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect line, just start a conversation with someone new or at a party, see a group talking. Try joining in.
So pushing our boundaries a bit in a manageable way.
Right. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. You'll see most people are pretty open, and those worst-case scenarios you imagine, they rarely happen.
Okay, let's switch gears to another overthinking trap. Making decisions. I get stuck in analysis paralysis, weighing every possible outcome.
Decisions, oh yeah, they can breed overthinking. It's that fear of making the wrong choice, like we have to predict the future perfectly.
How do we use those 5 steps to handle decision dilemmas then?
Acknowledge the overthinking first. Then, instead of striving for certainty, which is often impossible, challenge the idea that there's only one right answer. Most choices have lots of possible outcomes. It's okay not to know everything up front.
Accepting uncertainty, that's tough but important.
It is. You can also use those positive affirmations to boost your confidence in handling challenges. I trust my gut, or I make choices that align with my values.
Focusing on our own inner compass, not getting lost in the what-ifs.
Exactly. And hey, even if a decision doesn't turn out exactly how you hoped, it's a chance to learn, not a failure. Every choice, every experience gives us valuable info for making better choices later on.
It's like we're taking back control from those overthinking patterns, not letting them run the show, learning to handle challenges with more awareness, confidence, and being kind to ourselves.
That's what it's all about. You can rewire your brain, create a more peaceful, fulfilling relationship with your own thoughts. It's pretty powerful stuff.
This deep dive has been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all this with us today.
My pleasure. And to everyone listening, be patient with yourselves. Practice those steps. Celebrate every win, no matter how small.
That's true. We're all in this together. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to subscribe and drop a comment. Let us know any other topics you'd like us to explore. Until next time, stay curious and keep diving deep.